I don't think it comes as much of a surprise to anybody that vacationing is expensive. I mean, travel in general can definitely be expensive, especially if you're visiting a popular vacation destination like somewhere here in Central Florida, you know, Walt Disney World, Universal. And of course, you want to save some money where you can, but sometimes in an attempt to save money, you can actually cost yourself a lot more than you thought you would. And that's what I want to spend some time talking about today. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this quiet corner of Celebration, Florida, where we're hanging out in this nice covered area. There are some picnic tables here. It's honestly a really great place to sit down and have a conversation, which is what we're doing right now. So look, like I said, everyone wants to save a buck when they travel, and one of the things that we do is chat with you about some ways that you might be able to do that. And there are a lot of great ways to do that. But sometimes in that attempt to save money, you can end up making some pretty big mistakes that end up, like I said, costing you money. And look, I've done it, you've done it, everyone's done it. Live and learn, right? But our goal is to try and prevent you from making those mistakes, you know, give you the information that you want and need so that you can make the best decisions for you and your family in order to prepare accordingly. And I'm gonna be real with you, sometimes, especially when we're talking about this particular topic, it can be tough because of course the wants and needs of every family are going to be different, but there's also the illusion of savings. I've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. It's basically this concept that a choice is going to save you money, but if you take the time to crunch the numbers, it actually might be costing you more. This is especially true when we talk about things like Walt Disney World, we talk about things like accommodations, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll get back to that here in a bit. First though, I want to talk about something that is so true no matter where you're visiting, because yes, all of this applies to travel no matter where you're going. This is not a Walt Disney World specific discussion, and that is the stuff that you're packing. Man, I feel like we could talk about packing for days because everyone has so much to say about it, you know what I mean? Especially nowadays where people are trying to keep everything in one bag, especially for those of you who are flying. You know, you only want to do this with a carry-on, you only want to do this with a backpack. And so the focus is often, what can I avoid bringing? How can I prevent myself from overpacking? And this is a great discussion. It's a good one to think about, but there are also a few things that if you don't bring them and you end up needing them are going to cost you a fortune. And at the top of that list is a sweatshirt and or some sort of jacket, something to keep you warm. Now I know I've already lost some of you because you're thinking that is the bulkiest item. I definitely don't want to bring that with me when I travel. But here's the thing, it's also one of the most expensive items that you can find yourself needing to buy when you're on the road. And because it's so bulky, so many people don't bring this with them. And then when they realize they need it, which happens more often than you might think, you find yourself spending way too much money on this garment that you easily could have just brought. Now again, this is one of those things that's really important to keep in mind no matter where you're traveling to, but especially if it's a warmer vacation destination like Florida, I think that there's this mentality of it's going to be hot, I'm not going to bring a hoodie or a jacket or a sweatshirt, and then you're kind of caught off guard when it does end up being cooler than you anticipated. Don't forget, places like Florida often do get chilly. Also, because it is hot here, sometimes when you go indoors to different establishments, it can be really, really chilly, especially if you've been outside and sweating. So having something to put on when you go inside can be really useful as well, especially if you're sensitive to temperature changes. Now, of course, I'm saying hoodie, jacket, something like that, but there are plenty of other options. Flannels, for example, that can like fold down a little bit better, you know, be a little bit more compact when you travel. So just find something that works best for you, but I definitely don't think that you should go without because you might be surprised. This is something that you might end up needing. And then, you know, grabbing a sweatshirt or a hoodie, that's like $60, $70, sometimes even more. So that's gonna take a huge chunk out of your budget without you even realizing it. Now, I know some of you are thinking to yourself, hold on a second, I can just go somewhere else, go outside of that tourist area to get something a little bit more affordable. Great point, but again, the illusion of savings, keep that in mind. We're gonna talk about that here in a second, but what do you say we move on? Find another place to go hang out for a bit, see more of this town. All right, we've made our way to another corner of Celebration, and we're gonna go sit on that bench. See it right there? It's right there. Such a cute little bench. I love this area, but unfortunately, it is a little busy, which, you know, that happens. The thing that has us hanging out in the Jeep right now, though, is that they got some work going. I don't know if you can hear it, but they're not only cutting grass and stuff, but they're blowing it around, and I'm not dealing with that. the noise or the particles. So let's wrap up this thought and then we'll move on. Like I was saying, yeah, it can be really appealing to go to a place where you can get a more affordable hoodie. For example, we'll stick with that for the sake of discussion. But for most people, especially those of you who might not have it because you were packing light because you were flying, for example, you need to keep in mind that there's cost associated with getting to that place that's going to have a more affordable hoodie. So if we're using Walt Disney World as an example, it can cost you $10, $15 one way before tip to get to Walmart, let's say. Then you have to buy the hoodie at whatever that price is, and you have to pay that other $10, $15 to get back. So you're adding $20 to $30 on top of the price that you're paying, ultimately, in most cases, negating the savings. So let's say it was a $30 hoodie, you're adding another $30 to it, boom, that's $60. You could buy a $60 hoodie at Walt Disney World and it won't take you the time to get there and back. Now we're talking about a hoodie in this case, right? But this is true for so many things, especially when we're talking about things like sundries, maybe food or snack items. You often hear people at vacation destinations around the country and around the world talk about how much more expensive it is to just buy it from your hotel or buy it nearby, buy it from the vacation destination. And yeah, sometimes it is more expensive than it would be at your local drugstore, Walmart, whatever. But more often than not, it's a lot more affordable than if you were to go out of your way to get that one thing. Because again, we're talking about that additional cost to go get that thing. Now, am I suggesting that you only ever buy these necessities from a hotel or vacation destination? No. Absolutely not. There are going to be times where it makes sense to pay for that rideshare or, depending on your circumstance, to rent a car for that day to go do some running around, especially if you've planned that in to your vacation or into your travels. I mean, especially if you have a long list of things that you're going to be purchasing, maybe you're going to be doing a full grocery list, you're going to be buying a bunch of snacks, it can definitely save you a ton of money. And, the cost of transportation, that rental car, the rideshare, whatever, may be outweighed by that savings. If it is, I definitely think it's an option worth considering. But more often than not, if it's a last minute thing, you just need that one thing, the savings, even when that thing is overpriced, is probably going to be much more if you buy it at the hotel, at the vacation destination, than if you factor in the cost to get to the place where you can get it cheaper. Now, I will say, for those of you who are watching this and you're thinking what's the situation with the cost of sundries and whatever at Walt Disney World, all those last minute items, those little snacks and stuff. I find the snacks are definitely overpriced. I personally think that you should just bring snacks with you. It avoids that problem. But again, that's the conversation that we're having to begin with, bring the thing with you, right? But when it comes to things that maybe you weren't expecting you would need, those sundries, medications, things for babies and whatnot, we keep an eye out at the hotels and at the theme parks as well. And the pricing isn't that bad. In fact, we've done side-by-side comparisons before, and the prices are right in line with what you can get off Amazon. So again, not a big deal to just buy it if you need it, if it's that one thing. Also, speaking of things like Amazon, places where you can order groceries, necessities, and have it brought to you, if you're traveling to a place where that's available, this can be a great option, especially if there's not going to be a minimum purchase, because yes, sometimes there is a minimum purchase in order to have something delivered, or a hefty fee. Again, those little fees will sneak up on you. Also, depending on where you're traveling, maybe you're traveling out of the country, this isn't an option, but it's one that you should know about. Just kind of keep it in your back pocket. I have done Target deliveries when I traveled before, which has worked out really well. Also, when I was road tripping and I had access to a car, I did use the pickup in store. That worked out really nicely. You can, of course, do that if you're using a ride share. Again, same thing that I mentioned before though, does the savings outweigh the cost? I also know a number of people who have done the Amazon delivery thing. I believe there are even Amazon lockers over at the All-Stars, which makes things super convenient as well. I personally haven't used that though, so if you have, share your experience in a comment. Also, yes, we've moved to another corner of Celebration. We're just outside of town center. If we kind of walk this direction, we'll be on that path that walks around the lake. It's not super quiet. They got a little bit of work going on, but yeah, it'll do. Anyway, another mistake that people make is choosing the wrong accommodations. Boy, oh boy, can this have you going down a path that you never expected it might, especially when you're visiting a place like Walt Disney World. Now look, yes, accommodations, hotels, whatever, they're a place to rest your head. And depending on how you travel, your list of wants and needs out of that accommodation might be long or very, very short. We've talked about this before. I've stayed at a lot of different places at a lot of different price points. And so I get it. I get wanting to have that more luxurious accommodation, but I also get wanting to have just a place to park it for the evening. But look, there are some vacations where this can become a very big mistake, and Walt Disney World is one of them. You know, in an attempt to save money, you choose an accommodation that's a little bit more out of the way, maybe outside the bubble, whether it's the Disney bubble, the Universal bubble, whatever the case, and you think this is great because my price per night is less. But just like some of the things we talked about a little bit earlier, more often than not, when you're outside that bubble, you find yourself with some additional things you need to be taking into consideration, especially because some of these things can and will cost you money. We hear about things like this all the time, especially when we talk about Walt Disney World. I'm gonna stay off property. I'm gonna go stay at a place that isn't owned and operated by Walt Disney World so that I can pay less per night. And sure, when you're just looking at the price per night, sometimes this works out. The maths, as they say. But more often than not, when you choose to go this route, there are some things, some stipulations, if you will, that can and do come with an additional cost, which can easily be added to the cost per night, sometimes bringing that cost up higher than you would have paid if you stayed at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. And again, we're talking about Walt Disney World in this particular case because it's a great example, but this isn't isolated to Walt Disney World. It's not even isolated to theme parks. The same can be said for visiting major cities, for example. These things, these additional price tags, this additional money that you're gonna have to pay per night can come in the form of any number of things, including but not limited to a parking fee at the hotel itself, parking fees at your destination. If you're not gonna be driving down and you're not gonna have access to your own car, you have to decide if you're gonna rent a car, if you're gonna use ride shares. All of that is going to be added to what you're ultimately spending per night. And I can tell you from experience that that drives the cost per night up really fast. In fact, during a stay that we did, was it in 2021? Russ and I ran into this exact thing. We went with an affordable accommodation, we rented a car, and we ended up paying more per night than it would have cost us to just stay at a moderate resort. And yeah, I did just say moderate, a more expensive option. It was significantly more than it would have cost us to stay at a value. Now in that case, it was a bit of a special circumstance. We had other things we wanted to do in other parts of Florida. We were exploring around prior to our move. And so the roughly $400 a night that we ended up paying when you factor all of that in, it was worth it for us at that time. And there are plenty of people for whom it is going to be worth it. Maybe you have a family that's just bigger, you want to rent a whole house, maybe you don't have to worry about the transportation bit because you're going to be driving your own car and you're an annual pass holder, whatever the case. But it's just another example of how important it is to crunch those numbers before you just go with something. Because again, it's that illusion of savings. You think you're saving money and you're just not. You're spending more. It really does get you. It really does. And you know, there are definitely some other things that can sneak up on you as well that we've kind of touched on. Like, for example, the cost of a rental car and the associated fees. Not just when you're visiting a place like Walt Disney World, but when you're traveling to, I don't know, a major city. I actually saw this a lot when I was road tripping around the country. I was planning a stay here or there, maybe to see something that I'd never seen before, and it was kind of amazing to me to realize that staying at a particular hotel was going to be a $70 a night fee just to have a car. Then of course there are parking fees for things like museums and different areas of the city. You can't just park there in a number of cases. It's going to cost you. And while that might be unavoidable if you have a car already, like in my case, and you're road tripping through, it can also cost you an arm and a leg if it wasn't something that was necessary for you and your family. You know, maybe you're from a place where you don't have to deal with parking fees like you would in whatever city, whatever area, and you think that renting a car would just be so much easier than taking public transit or just walking. And the tough thing too when it comes to things like this is that it can really sneak up on you because it's not always easy to find this information. You might not even be thinking about looking for it. So now you know, now you got the heads up. Take a look, keep an eye out, make sure that you don't make a decision that's going to cost you a ton. All right. We made our way home for this last one, and yes, it is a little bit loud here. They're doing some work across the way, so bear with me, but I'll also keep it short. The last mistake that I definitely think will blow your budget is allowing other people to drive your vacation. Now I know this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, I say this all the time, but blindly following guidance, especially that guidance that comes with an upsell, it's going to cost you extra money, when you're not taking into consideration how that's going to work for your family, if it's going to work for your family, is the quickest way to spend money that you didn't need to spend and to watch your budget just float away. I mean, you can even see that with some of the things that we talked about today. Yeah, they're going to be a great way to waste money for some families, but there are other families that doing things like staying off property, renting a car, that's going to be the way to go. And I know I've already mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again. You got to crunch numbers. You got to find out if the juice is worth the squeeze for you. And that's one of the reasons that we have conversations like this, so that you can have the information to hopefully figure out what is going to be right for you and just to get the wheels turning, to think about what your options are. But I think that about rounds out our list for today. Of course, I want to hear what you have to say. What are some mistakes that you think people make that blow their budget? Tell me all about it in a comment down below. Tell me if you agree or disagree with me. Tell me what works for you or doesn't work for you based on your family dynamic. I want to hear it all. Of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future discussions. But for now, I gotta get going. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then.